Welcome back to Bookkast, Bestsellers in Minutes. And today we're diving deep into Mel Robbins' The Let Them Theory. It's a book that basically tells you, hey, if you want to transform your relationships, learn to let go.
Yeah, and it sounds a bit counterintuitive at first, right?
Yeah.
But the main idea is pretty simple. You can't really control other people, just how you react to them.
Okay, that makes sense in theory. But how do we actually, put that into practice? What does that look like?
So Mel introduces this let me framework. We'll definitely get into all the details of that. But first, I think it's important to understand a little about Mel's background, and specifically her 5-second rule. Have you heard of that?
Yeah.
It's all about overcoming hesitation, just counting down from 5 and then taking action.
Right. I actually use that to finally clean out my closet. But how does that connect to this whole let them theory?
So the 5-second rule was really about Mel taking control of her own actions, but let them kind of shifts the focus, It's about accepting what you can't control in other people. It's like she took that same action principle and applied it to the messiness of relationships.
So instead of trying to change someone, you're changing how you react to them.
Exactly.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Where does this let them idea even come from?
So Mel shares this kind of funny story about her son's prom night. It was a total disaster, no corsage, no dinner reservation, pouring rain. I mean, the whole 9 yards.
Oh, no.
And, as a parent, she naturally tried to take control and fix everything. You know how it is.
Oh, I can definitely relate to that parental panic, yeah.
But then, watching her son just run off into the rain with his friends, she had this epiphany. Wait a minute, I can't control any of this. I can only control my own reaction. And that's where Let Them was born.
Wow, that's amazing. So letting go of that need to control everything is the first step.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that other people's choices are just that. They're theirs, and holding on to that need for control, it just leads to stress and frustration.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be helpful, but it still feels a little passive. Are we just supposed to let people walk all over us?
So that's where the let me part comes in. It's that crucial second step that turns this from this passive concept to a really powerful tool for self-empowerment.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this let me idea.
Think of it like a seesaw. When you give someone power over your emotions, you're on the lower end, right? And you feel powerless. Let them brings you back up. But let me is you pushing off the ground and taking control of your side of the seesaw.
So it's not just accepting what you can't control, but also taking responsibility for what you can.
Exactly. It's about shifting your focus and energy from trying to change others to making choices that actually empower you.
I see, yeah.
Mel even uses this phrase. She says, stop thinking about what they should do and start thinking about what you need to do.
That's really powerful. It takes the focus off blaming others and puts it back on yourself, on what you can do.
Right.
Yeah.
And when you combine those two steps, that let me, you create this amazing framework for navigating pretty much any relationship challenge,
Okay, so I could see how this could work in theory, but how about in real life? Can you give me an example?
Yeah.
Something everyone can relate to.
Let's say you're stuck on a plane next to a passenger who will not stop coughing. It's annoying, all right?
Yeah, I hate that.
You can't control their cough. You're getting more and more agitated.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Right?
I've been there.
So how does let me apply here. First, let them cough. You acknowledge it's happening, but you refuse to let it steal your peace.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And then let me take care of myself. Put on headphones, focus on a book, anything that shifts your focus and helps you manage your own experience.
That's actually a really simple but effective strategy. It's you're choosing to protect your own well-being instead of letting someone else's actions just totally dictate your mood.
Exactly. You go from feeling like a victim of the situation to taking control of your own experience. And that shift in mindset can be incredibly liberating.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the coughing passenger, but what about more serious issues like dealing with a difficult coworker or even your boss can let me help there too?
Absolutely. Imagine you're working hard, you're exceeding expectations, but your boss keeps overlooking you for that promotion.
Yeah.
It's frustrating. It's demoralizing. You can't force them to recognize your value,
I've been there, and it's the worst. It's so easy to get caught up in resentment and feeling stuck.
Right. And that's where let them, let me can help you break free. Let them do their thing. Their actions are a reflection of them, not you.
Okay.
And then let me focus on what I can control.
Like updating my resume and looking for other opportunities.
Exactly.
Okay.
You shift your energy from trying to change your boss to taking control of your own career path.
That makes so much sense. It's about focusing on action rather than dwelling on things you can't change.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm really starting to see the potential of this framework. What about applying let them let me to social media?
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah, because it's like it can be such a breeding ground for like comparison and insecurity, right?
That's a great example because social media is all about like perception and control.
Right.
Right. People present these carefully curated versions of themselves, and it's easy to like fall into the trap of comparing ourselves and feeling inadequate.
Totally. I've definitely been guilty of that myself.
Yeah.
But how can let me help with those feelings of comparison and insecurity?
Well, you can't control what other people post or how they choose to like portray themselves online. So let them have their perfect, filtered photos and witty captions. That's their thing.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. But what about the let me part? How do we shift our focus inward when we're constantly bombarded with all these external messages?
Let me focus on what I want to share, what I want to create, what brings me joy.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So instead of getting caught up in the comparison game, you focus on expressing your authentic self, connecting with people who resonate with you, and building a presence that reflects your values.
It's like taking back control of your own narrative instead of like
Yeah.
letting social media dictate how you feel about yourself.
Yeah.
I love that. It feels really empowering. Okay, so we've covered a few different scenarios, but what about family? That can be a whole other level of complexity when it comes to relationships and letting go of control.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. Family dynamics can be incredibly challenging, especially because those relationships are often loaded with expectations, history, and strong emotions.
Yeah, for sure. It's not always easy to separate our own desires from the expectations and opinions of our family members. So how does let me apply, like in the context of family relationships?
Well, I think you have to start by acknowledging that family dynamics can be tough. And it's natural to want to like control or influence the people we love, especially when we see them making choices that we don't agree with or that we think might be harmful.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But isn't there like a fine line between like offering support and trying to control someone's life? How do we navigate that?
That's where let them let me can be really, really helpful. It's about recognizing that we can't force our family members to change or to live their lives according to our expectations. We can express our concerns, offer support, but ultimately they have to make their own choices.
So let them make their own decisions, even if we don't agree with them. That sounds really hard, especially when it comes to our kids or parents.
Yeah, it can be incredibly difficult, especially when we feel like we're watching them make mistakes or head down a path that might lead to pain. But the reality is we can't control other people's lives, even if we wish we could.
But what about offering advice or trying to like guide them in a different direction? Isn't that part of being a supportive family member?
Yeah, of course, it's natural to want to share our wisdom and experience with our loved ones, and sometimes our advice can be helpful. But it's important to recognize the difference between offering support and trying to control the outcome.
Okay, I'm starting to see the distinction. So it's not about like withholding our opinions or advice,
Yeah.
but about recognizing that ultimately our family members have to make their own choices.
Exactly. And that's where the let me part comes in. It's about focusing on what we can control, like our own reactions, our own boundaries, and how we choose to like show up in those relationships.
So if we're constantly butting heads with a family member over their choices, let them make those choices and let me focus on like protecting my own peace and setting healthy boundaries.
That's a great way to put it. It's about shifting our focus from trying to change them to figuring out how we can best navigate those relationships while also taking care of ourselves. And, that can look different in every family.
Right, because every family has its own like unique dynamics and challenges. Okay, so we've talked about the general concept of let them, let me in family relationships. Can you give me like a specific example of how this might play out in real life?
Sure. Let's say you have an adult child who's making choices that you strongly disagree with. Maybe they're in a relationship that you think is unhealthy, or they're pursuing a career path that you think is, a dead end.
Ooh, I can feel the parental anxiety already. It's so tough to watch our kids make choices that we think might lead to pain or disappointment.
It absolutely is. But remember, you can't live their lives for them. You can express your concerns, you can offer your support, but ultimately they have to make their own choices and learn from their own experiences.
Okay. So in that situation, let them pursue that relationship or that career path, even if you think it's a mistake.
It's about letting go of that need to control the outcome. Trusting that they have the capacity to make their own decisions, even if those decisions lead to some bumps along the way.
But what about the let me part in this scenario? How do we protect ourselves when we're feeling anxious or like worried about our loved ones?
So let me focus on managing my own anxiety. Let me set boundaries that protect my own well-being. Let me communicate my concerns clearly but respectfully without trying to, control or manipulate the situation.
So it's about finding that balance between offering support and respecting their autonomy. It's not about being passive or indifferent, but about recognizing that we can't force our loved ones to live their lives according to our blueprints.
Exactly. And sometimes the most loving thing we can do is to step back and let them figure things out for themselves, even if it's hard to watch. Now, let's talk about a specific aspect of family dynamics that can be particularly challenging: step parenting.
Okay. Step parenting definitely adds a whole other layer of complexity to the mix, right?
Yeah.
You're blending families, navigating different parenting styles, and often dealing with like the emotional baggage that comes with divorce and remarriage.
It's a delicate dance that requires a lot of patience, understanding, and a willingness to let go of control.
So how does let me apply like in the context of step parenting? It seems like there's a lot of potential for like conflict and hurt feelings when you're trying to merge two families with different histories and dynamics.
You're absolutely right, and that's precisely why let me can be so valuable in this situation. It's about recognizing that you can't force instant love or connection. You
Right.
can't expect stepchildren to just automatically embrace you as a parent figure, and you can't control their feelings or behaviors.
So in a step parenting situation, let them adjust to the new family dynamic at their own pace, even if it's like slow or messy.
Exactly. And that might mean accepting that there will be moments of resistance, resentment, or even like outright rejection. It's about allowing those feelings to exist without taking them personally or trying to like force a connection that isn't there yet.
That sounds incredibly challenging, especially when you're trying to like build a new family unit and create a sense of harmony.
It definitely takes a lot of patience and understanding, and that's where the let me part comes in. It's about focusing on what you can control, like your own actions, your own intentions, and how you choose to, show up in those relationships.
So let me be a consistent, loving presence, even if I'm not met with like immediate warmth or acceptance.
Exactly. And that might mean setting boundaries, communicating your expectations clearly, and being, a positive role model even when it's difficult or feels unappreciated. It's about focusing on building trust and connection over time rather than like trying to force a certain outcome.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about focusing on the long game and letting those relationships like evolve organically rather than trying to control every aspect of the process.
Hmm.
It's about recognizing that building a blended family, it takes time, patience, and a whole lot of grace.
You got it. And remember, even when things feel challenging, even when you're met with, resistance or negativity, you always have a choice. You can choose to react with anger, frustration, or resentment. Or you can choose to respond with compassion, understanding, and a willingness to let go of the things you can't control.
That's such an important reminder. It's not always easy to lose, like the high road, especially when we're dealing with, complex family dynamics and hurt feelings.
Hmm.
But ultimately, responding with grace and compassion is the path to creating healthier, more fulfilling relationships, even when those relationships are messy and imperfect.
You're absolutely right. It's about recognizing that we can't control other people's choices or behaviors, but
Mm.
we can control our own reactions. And we can create a space for love, acceptance, and understanding to flourish, even amidst the challenges.
And sometimes let them and let me might mean like recognizing that a particular relationship is toxic or unhealthy and choosing to distance ourselves for our own well-being.
That's a really important point. Let me is not about condoning harmful behavior or staying in situations that are, damaging to our mental or emotional health. It's about recognizing our own agency and choosing to create a life that's aligned with our values and our needs.
So sometimes let them means letting go of a relationship that is no longer serving us, and let me means like prioritizing our own well-being and seeking out connections that are more supportive and fulfilling.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that We have the power to choose who we let into our lives and how we allow those relationships to impact us. And sometimes the most loving and empowering choice is to walk away from a situation that is causing us pain or holding us back from our full potential.
Okay, that's a really valuable perspective. It's about recognizing that let them let me is not just a framework for navigating difficult interactions,
No.
but also a tool for creating a life that is truly aligned with our values and our vision for ourselves.
Precisely.
Mhm.
It's about taking ownership of our lives, recognizing our own agency, and making choices that empower us to create relationships that are healthy, supportive, and fulfilling. And that journey often starts with letting go of the things we can't control and focusing on what we can.
That's a powerful message, and it really resonates with the idea of like taking responsibility for our own happiness.
Mm.
Now, I know that Mel Robbins also talks a lot about the challenges of comparison, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with like images and stories of other people's, seemingly perfect lives.
Right. Comparison is something that most of us struggle with, especially with the rise of social media and the constant pressure to present a certain image of success, happiness, fulfillment.
It can be so easy to fall into the trap of comparing ourselves to others and feeling like, we're not enough, not successful enough, not attractive enough, not happy enough.
And that kind of thinking can be incredibly damaging to our self-esteem and our overall well-being. It can lead us to focus on what we lack rather than appreciating what we have and celebrating our own unique gifts and accomplishments.
So how does let them let me apply to the challenge of comparison? How can we use this framework to overcome those feelings of inadequacy and embrace our own unique journeys?
Well, the first step is recognizing that comparison is often a trap, a distraction that keeps us from focusing on what truly matters. It's about understanding that, everyone is on their own path, facing their own challenges and experiencing their own, unique set of joys and sorrows.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about recognizing that we're all running our own races, and comparing ourselves to others is like comparing, apples to oranges.
Exactly. And when we get caught up in that comparison game, we lose sight of our own goals, our own values and our own definition of success.
So in a situation where we find ourselves comparing ourselves to others, the let them part is about acknowledging that they're on their own path and we can't control their choices, their accomplishments, or their perceived happiness.
Right. And that might mean, limiting our exposure to social media, choosing to focus on our own goals and accomplishments, and reminding ourselves that what we see online is often, a carefully curated version of reality.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about taking control of our own narrative and choosing to focus on what's truly important to us rather than getting caught up in this endless cycle of comparison. But what about the let me part in this scenario? How do we shift our focus inward and embrace our own unique journeys when we're surrounded by, messages that tell us we need to be more, do more, achieve more?
Right. So let me celebrate my own accomplishments, big or small. Let me focus on my own growth and development rather than, measuring myself against someone else's yardstick. Let me cultivate gratitude for the good things in my life rather than dwelling on what I perceive to be lacking.
I love that. It's about choosing to focus on our own strengths, our own progress, and our own definition of success, rather than letting external messages, dictate how we feel about ourselves. It's about recognizing that we are enough just as we are.
Exactly. And that shift in mindset can be incredibly empowering.
Mhm.
When we let go of the need to compare ourselves to others, we free up so much energy and mental space to focus on what truly matters, which is our own growth, our own happiness, and our own unique contributions to the world.
That's a really beautiful and inspiring message.
Yeah.
It's about choosing to embrace our own imperfections, celebrate our own journey, and focus on becoming the best versions of ourselves rather than trying to be someone else or live up to some external ideal.
You got it. And remember, even when we slip into those patterns of comparison, even when we find ourselves, feeling inadequate or envious, we always have the power to choose a different perspective.
Yeah.
We can choose to focus on our own strengths, our own progress, and the things we're grateful for.
Okay, so we've talked about let them let me, the context of family relationships and the challenge of comparison. Now, I'm curious to hear how this framework applies to friendships.
Oh, yeah, friendships.
Yeah.
Friendships are such a vital part of our lives, but they can also be, incredibly complex and challenging, especially as we navigate the different stages of adulthood.
Absolutely. I think a lot of us struggle with like maintaining friendships as we get older, especially as we move, change careers, start families, and just generally have like less free time and energy to invest in social connections.
Yeah, you're right. Mel actually calls this the great scattering. When life pulls us in different directions, it disrupts those like natural flows of friendship that we experienced in our younger years. And she highlights three key pillars of friendship that are often disrupted by the great scattering: proximity, timing, and energy.
Okay, let's break those down. What does she mean by proximity?
Proximity is simply about like physical closeness. When you're physically close to someone, you naturally spend more time together, which allows a friendship to develop organically. But when you move away, start families or your careers take off, maintaining that proximity becomes a lot more challenging.
Right, it's not as simple as like popping over to each other's dorm rooms or meeting up after class anymore.
Exactly. It takes more effort, more intentionality, and a willingness to prioritize those relationships despite the demands of, our busy lives.
And what about timing? How does that like play a role in friendships?
Timing is about like being in similar stages of life. When you're at similar points in your careers, relationships, or family journeys, it's easier to relate to each other's experiences and to find common ground.
So when you're both like single and in your 20s, it's easy to connect over like late night adventures and career aspirations. But when one of you gets married and has kids, those shared experiences can become less frequent, which can create a sense of distance.
Right, that's a great example. It's not that the friendship is necessarily over, but it might, require more flexibility and understanding as you both navigate different chapters in your lives.
And what about energy? You mentioned that as the third pillar of friendship.
Energy is about like, the vibe, the connection, the effort that you're both putting into the friendship. Sometimes friendships naturally fade because people change and grow in different directions. Your interests might evolve, your values might shift, or your energy levels might simply no longer align.
It's like you're no longer like vibrating on the same frequency, and the connection just doesn't feel as strong or as effortless as it used to.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's about recognizing that change is inevitable and allowing those relationships to flow naturally rather than like clinging to what was.
Okay, so these three pillars,
Mm-hmm.
proximity, timing, and energy, can really impact the course of our friendships, especially as we navigate, the complexities of adulthood.
Right. And that's where let them, let me can be so helpful. It's about recognizing that we can't control those external factors that often influence our friendships. We can't control where people live, what stage of life they're in, or how their, interests and priorities might evolve.
So in the context of friendships, let them live their lives, pursue their own path, and make choices that might lead them in different directions than us.
Exactly. And that can be a really difficult thing to accept, especially when we cherish those connections and we don't want to lose them.
Yeah. It can be heartbreaking to feel like a friendship is fading,
Mm.
especially if it was once like a central part of our lives. But what about the let me part in this scenario? How do we navigate those feelings of like loss and create new connections when we're feeling like lonely or isolated?
So let me be open to new connections, even if it feels awkward or uncomfortable. Let me invest in the friendships that bring me joy and support, even if those friendships require, more effort or intentionality. Let me be grateful for the friendships I've had, even if some of them have, run their course.
That's really beautiful. It's about recognizing that even though like friendships might change or fade over time, our capacity for connection and belonging, it's limitless. It's about choosing to open our hearts to new possibilities,
Right.
and to create a life that's rich with meaningful relationships.
You said it perfectly. It's about embracing the ebb and flow of life and recognizing that even though some friendships might not last forever, we can always, create new connections and find new sources of joy and support.
Okay. So we've talked about how let them, let me can help us navigate, the complexities of family relationships, the challenge of comparison, and the evolving nature of friendships. Now, I'm curious to hear how this framework applies to situations where we're trying to help someone who's struggling maybe with addiction, mental health challenges, or chronic self-sabotaging behavior. It's heartbreaking to watch someone we love suffer, and it's natural to want to do everything in our power to like rescue them.
Right. It's that primal instinct to, protect and care for those we love that drives us to want to fix their problems and shield them from pain. But as Mel points out, sometimes our attempts to rescue can actually do more harm than good. When we constantly jump in to solve other people's problems, we're essentially preventing them from experiencing the natural consequences of their choices.
It's like we're creating a safety net that prevents them from like hitting rock bottom and realizing the need for change.
Exactly. And those consequences, as uncomfortable as they might be, can often be like the catalyst for growth and transformation. Think of it like this. If someone is struggling to learn how to swim and you constantly pull them out of the water before they have a chance to figure it out for themselves, they'll never develop the skills or the confidence to stay afloat on their own.
That's such a powerful analogy. It really highlights the importance of allowing people to face their challenges and develop their own resilience.
Absolutely. And it's not about abandoning them or withholding support. It's about offering a different kind of support, a support that empowers them to take ownership of their own healing journey.
So in the context of helping someone who's struggling, let them experience the consequences of their choices, even if it's painful to watch.
It's about recognizing that we can't want their sobriety or healing or well-being more than they do. We can't force them to change if they're not ready or willing to do the work themselves.
That's a really hard truth to accept, especially when we're dealing with someone we love like deeply. But what of the let me part in this scenario? How do we protect our own well-being while also offering support to someone who's struggling?
So let me set boundaries that protect my own mental and emotional health. Let me detach from the outcome and focus on my own well-being. Let me offer support without enabling or rescuing.
So it's about finding that balance between like offering compassion and setting healthy boundaries.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing that we can't fix other people's problems, but we can offer support and encouragement while also, taking care of ourselves.
You got it. It's a delicate dance, and it's not always easy. But remember, let me
Yeah.
is not a one-size-fits-all solution. It's a framework,
Yeah.
a set of principles that can guide us as we, navigate the complexities of relationships and the challenges of life.
That's a really helpful way to frame it. It's not about having all the answers or being perfect. It's about approaching these situations with more awareness, compassion, and intentionality.
Exactly. About recognizing our own agency, letting go of what we can't control, and focusing on what we can.
Now, I know that Mel also talks about the importance of like modeling the behavior we want to see in others as opposed to simply, lecturing or preaching.
That's right. She highlights the power of social contagion, the the idea that people's behaviors are contagious. We're naturally influenced by the actions and attitudes of, those around us, even if we're not consciously aware of it.
So if we want someone to like adopt a healthier lifestyle, for example, we're more likely to influence them by like making healthy choices ourselves and inviting them to, join us rather than simply telling them they need to eat better and exercise more.
Exactly. It's about showing, not telling. And it's also about creating, a positive association with the change that we're hoping to inspire.
That makes so much sense. It's like we're planting, seeds of possibility and allowing the other person to choose whether or not they want to water those seeds and help them grow.
You got it. And it's important to remember that change takes time. We can't expect people to like transform their behaviors or their beliefs overnight. It's a process, and it's often, messy and nonlinear.
So patience and compassion are key.
Absolutely. And remember, even when we're coming from a place of love and good intentions, we can't force anyone to change. We can plant seeds, we can offer support, but ultimately it's up to the other person to choose to make a change.
That's a really important reminder. Now, I know that Mel also talks about the importance of like celebrating progress, no matter how small it might seem.
That's right. Positive reinforcement is a powerful tool for motivating change. When we acknowledge and celebrate the positive steps someone is taking, we're encouraging them to keep moving in the right direction.
So instead of focusing on like what they're not doing or how far they still have to go, we focus on the progress they're making, even if it's like just baby steps.
Exactly. It's about shifting our perspective from criticism to encouragement, from judgment to support.
That makes so much sense. It's about creating a positive feedback loop that reinforces, the desired behavior and helps the other person feel good about the changes they're making.
You got it. And remember, even when we're trying to influence change in others, the let me part of the equation is still important, you know? We have to take care of ourselves, set boundaries, and recognize that we can't control the outcome.
So it's about finding that balance between offering support and recognizing our own limitations.
Yeah.
It's about accepting that we can't force anyone to change, but we can, create an environment that supports their growth and evolution.
Exactly. And ultimately that's all we can do. Plant seeds, offer support, and trust that the other person will find their own way.
That's a really powerful message, and it speaks to the idea of surrendering to what is and focusing on what we can control.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of relationships, I know that Mel Robbins also talks a lot about like the challenges of love and dating, especially in today's world where it can feel like we're constantly bombarded with conflicting messages about how to find and sustain meaningful connections.
Right. Yeah. Dating in the digital age can be incredibly confusing and frustrating. We're constantly swiping and liking and messaging, but it can be, it can be hard to like cut through the noise and find genuine connection.
And I think a lot of us are carrying around like baggage from past relationships, which can make it even harder to open ourselves up to new possibilities.
Absolutely. Mel talks about the importance of healing from those past hurts and learning to trust ourselves again before we can, truly be open to a healthy, fulfilling relationship.
So how does let me that apply in the context of dating and relationships? How can this framework help us like navigate the ups and downs of finding love?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to remember that we can't control who we fall in love with or how other people feel about us. We can put ourselves out there. We can be open to meeting new people. But ultimately, we can't force someone to reciprocate our feelings.
That's such a hard lesson to learn, especially when we're, feeling lonely or desperate for connection.
It can be really tough, especially when we're bombarded with messages that tell us we need to be more, do more, or change ourselves in order to attract a partner. But Mel reminds us that true love is about being accepted for who we are, not for who we think we should be.
So in the context of dating, let them have their own preferences, their own baggage, and their own timeline for opening up to love.
Exactly. And that might mean, accepting that not everyone we're attracted to will be attracted to us and not every date will lead to a relationship.
Yeah. That's a hard pill to swallow, but it's also like incredibly freeing. It takes the pressure off trying to control the outcome and allows us to focus on simply like enjoying the journey of meeting new people and exploring different connections.
You got it. And it also means recognizing that we have the power to choose who we, let into our lives and how we allow those relationships to impact us.
So let me be discerning about, who I choose to date. Let me set boundaries that protect my emotional well-being and let me walk away from situations that are not serving me, even if it means being single for a while.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that being single is not a failure, but an opportunity for self-discovery, growth, and preparation for a truly fulfilling partnership.
Okay, I'm really starting to see how let me can help us navigate, the complexities of dating and relationships. It's about, letting go of the things we can't control, other people's feelings, choices, and timelines, and focusing on what we can control, our own actions, our own boundaries, and our own definition of what constitutes a healthy, fulfilling connection.
You've got it. It's a powerful framework for creating relationships that are built on respect, trust, and a shared desire for, growth and happiness.
So let's dive a little deeper into the let me aspect of dating and relationships. You mentioned setting boundaries. Can you elaborate on what that might look like in practice?
Sure. Boundaries are essentially about defining what's acceptable and unacceptable behavior in a relationship. It's about communicating your needs and expectations clearly and respectfully and being willing to walk away from, situations that are not aligned with your values.
Okay, that makes sense. So a boundary might be something like, I'm not comfortable with constant texting or calling, or I need time alone to recharge, or, I'm not willing to tolerate like disrespect or emotional manipulation.
Exactly. Boundaries are about protecting your own well-being and ensuring that you're treated with respect and consideration.
But what about the let them part in this scenario?
Wow.
How do we balance like setting boundaries with accepting our partners for who they are?
It's about recognizing that you can't change someone else's fundamental personality or force them to behave in ways that are, not authentic to who they are. You can communicate your needs, you can set boundaries, but ultimately it's up to them to decide whether, they're willing to respect those boundaries and meet you halfway.
So it's about letting go of like the fantasy of who we wish our partner was and embracing the reality of who they are with all their, quirks and imperfections.
Precisely. And it's also about recognizing that sometimes, even when we love someone deeply, even when we're committed to making a relationship work, there might be, fundamental incompatibilities that are simply too big to overcome.
And in those situations, let me might mean like recognizing that it's time to walk away, even if it's painful, in order to create space for both of you to find happiness and fulfillment, whether that's together or apart.
That's a really important point. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and for our partners is to let go, even if it's heartbreaking.
Okay, I'm really starting to see the depth and the nuance of this let them let me framework. It's not just about like simple solutions or quick fixes. It's about approaching relationships with more awareness, compassion, and intentionality,
Yeah.
and being willing to make choices that are aligned with our own values and our own definition of happiness.
You got it. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. We're all constantly learning and growing, and our relationships are always evolving. Let them, let me is simply a tool that can help us navigate those complexities with more grace, understanding, and a deeper sense of self-awareness.
That's such a powerful reminder. It's about embracing the journey, accepting the imperfections and choosing to focus on the things we can control while also, letting go of the things we can't.
Exactly. And ultimately it's about recognizing that we have the power to create a life that is filled with love, joy, and meaningful connections, even when those connections are messy, challenging, and sometimes even heartbreaking.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground today, from family dynamics to friendships to dating and relationships. Now, I'm curious to hear more about how Mel Robbins applies let them let me to the relationship we have with ourselves. It seems like that's a crucial piece of the puzzle, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The relationship we have with ourselves is the foundation upon which all other relationships are built. If we don't love, respect, and accept ourselves, it's incredibly difficult to create, healthy, fulfilling relationships with others.
That makes sense. It's like trying to, build a house on a shaky foundation.
Yeah.
If we don't have a strong sense of self-worth and self-love, it's hard to show up, authentically and confidently in our relationships.
Exactly. And Mel really emphasizes this point throughout the book. She encourages us to ask ourselves some really tough but important questions, like are we treating ourselves with the same kindness and compassion that we offer to others? Are we setting boundaries that protect our own well-being? Are we allowing ourselves to pursue our dreams and passions, even if it means, facing fear or disapproval?
Those are really powerful questions, and I think a lot of us would be surprised by our own answers. It's easy to get caught up in taking care of everyone else and putting our own needs on the back burner.
It's a common pattern, especially for women who are often socialized to be, caretakers and to prioritize the needs of others above their own.
So how do we apply let them let me to the relationship we have with ourselves? It seems a little paradoxical, doesn't it?
It might seem counterintuitive at first, but it's actually quite simple. Let them in this context refers to, the negative self-talk, the limiting beliefs, the inner critic that tells us we're not good enough, smart enough, or worthy enough.
Okay. So I'm starting to see how this works. So instead of like fighting those negative thoughts or trying to silence them, we let them be there. We acknowledge their presence, but we don't allow them to control us.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that those thoughts are just thoughts. They're not facts. They don't define us. We have the power to choose which thoughts we give weight to, and which thoughts we simply let pass by, like clouds in the sky.
I love that analogy. It's like watching those negative thoughts just drift by without getting caught up in their storm.
Hmm.
But what about the let me part in this scenario? How do we shift our focus inward and cultivate self-love and acceptance?
Right. So let me treat myself with kindness and compassion, even when I make mistakes or fall short of my own expectations. Let me celebrate my accomplishments, big or small, and acknowledge my own strengths and talents. Let me pursue my passions and dreams, even if, they scare me or seem impossible.
It's about giving ourselves permission to be fully human, with all our imperfections and vulnerabilities.
Exactly. And it's also about recognizing that self-love is not a destination. It's a journey. It's a practice that we cultivate every single day through, our thoughts, our actions, and the choices we make.
So it's not about like achieving some perfect state of self-love, but about making a conscious effort to treat ourselves with kindness, respect, and compassion, even when, we're struggling or feeling down on ourselves.
You got it.
Yeah.
And remember, just like in any relationship, the relationship we have with ourselves requires effort, attention, and a willingness to show up consistently even when it's hard.
Okay. I'm really resonating with this idea of applying let me to the relationship we have with ourselves. It's like we're both the giver and the receiver of love and acceptance. It's a really powerful concept.
It is, and it's a game changer when it comes to creating, healthy, fulfilling relationships in all areas of our lives. Because when we learn to love and accept ourselves, we naturally attract people and experiences that reflect that love and acceptance back to us.
That makes so much sense. It's like we're radiating a different energy when we come from a place of self-love and self-acceptance.
Exactly. And that energy is magnetic. It draws people in and creates a space for authentic connection and genuine intimacy.
So if we're struggling in our relationships, if we're feeling unloved or unappreciated, the first step is to like turn inward and examine the relationship we have with ourselves.
That's a great insight, because often the way we're treating ourselves is reflected in the way we allow others to treat us.
So if we're constantly like criticizing ourselves, putting ourselves down, or neglecting our own needs, we're sending the message that it's okay for others to do the same.
That's a really powerful point. It's like we're giving others permission to treat us the way we treat ourselves.
And conversely, when we treat ourselves with kindness, respect, and compassion, we're setting a standard for how we expect to be treated by others.
Exactly. And we're more likely to attract people into our lives who are capable of meeting that standard. So if you're looking to create, healthier, more fulfilling relationships, start by cultivating a loving and supportive relationship with yourself.
That's such great advice. It's about recognizing that we are worthy of love and respect, both from ourselves and from others.
And it's about making a conscious choice to show up for ourselves, even when it's hard, even when we feel like we don't deserve it. Because the truth is we all deserve love. We all deserve happiness. And we all have the power to create a life that reflects that.
Okay, I'm feeling so inspired and empowered by this conversation. I think Let Them Let Me is such a brilliant and accessible framework for navigating the complexities of relationships and creating a life that is truly aligned with our values and our vision for ourselves.
I agree. It's a powerful reminder that we have more control over our happiness and well-being than we often realize. And it's a beautiful invitation to embrace, acceptance, compassion, and the power of letting go.
Now, before we wrap up, I'd love to hear any final thoughts or advice you might have for our listeners who are ready to embrace their own Let Them Let Me journey.
Yeah, my advice would be to start small. Choose one area of your life where you're feeling stuck or frustrated in a relationship, and experiment with applying the Let Them Let Me framework. Notice what happens when you let go of the need to control, when you choose acceptance over resistance, and when you focus on what you can control rather than what you can't.
That's great advice. It's about taking those small steps, those baby steps, and building momentum over time.
Exactly. And remember, it's a journey, not a destination. There will be times when when you fall back into old patterns, when you struggle to let go, when you feel frustrated or resentful. And that's okay. Just notice those moments, acknowledge them, and gently guide yourself back to the principles of let them, let me.
It's about, being patient with ourselves, recognizing that change takes time and celebrating the small victories along the way.
You got it. And most importantly, have fun with it. Embrace the freedom and the empowerment that come with letting go and allowing yourself to be fully human with all your imperfections and your unlimited potential.
That's such a beautiful and inspiring message. I think we can all benefit from a little more, letting go, a little more acceptance and a lot more self-love.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful and thought-provoking conversation. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights with us today.
It's been my pleasure. I'm always excited to talk about Let Them, Let Me, because I truly believe it has the power to transform lives and create a more loving and compassionate world.
I agree. It's a message that resonates deeply, and I know our listeners are going to walk away from this deep dive feeling, inspired and empowered to create more filling relationships in all areas of their lives. And remember, you're not alone on this journey. There's a whole community of people who are, embracing let them, let me, and experiencing the transformative power of letting go and choosing love.
That's right. Mel has a fantastic online community where people can connect, share their experiences, and support each other on this journey.
That's awesome. I love that there's a space for people to connect and learn from each other. Okay, so we talked about, the power of let them, let me, but I think it's also important to acknowledge that this approach to relationships, it might not always be easy or comfortable.
You're absolutely right. It can be challenging to let go of control, to accept things as they are, and to set boundaries, especially when we're dealing with people we care about, deeply.
And sometimes let them, let me might mean having difficult conversations, making tough choices or even walking away from relationships that are no longer serving us.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
it's not a magic bullet that will instantly solve all our problems or make everyone around us behave the way we want them to. It's a practice, a commitment to showing up in our relationships with more awareness, compassion, and intentionality.
It's about recognizing that we have a choice in how we respond to the challenges and the complexities of human connection.
You said it perfectly. It's about choosing love over fear, acceptance over resistance, and empowerment over control.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive into the let them theory. It's such a powerful and practical framework for creating, healthier, happier, and more fulfilling relationships in all areas of our lives.
I agree. It's a message that resonates deeply, and I hope our listeners will walk away from this episode feeling, inspired and empowered to embrace their own let them let me journey.
I know I am. So there you have it, folks. Another bestseller tackled on Bookkast, Bestsellers in Minutes. If you're ready to explore the let them theory further, be sure to check out Mel Robbins' book and her amazing online community. Until next time, happy reading, and remember to let them and let me live your best life.